Hey gang, quick addendum to earlier videos. I won't call this officially one of the series. This is just a sort of a correction for the first video in the series. There was a comment on this one, which is Dipping the Nose Part 1. Let's go and look at that comment that I want to address. Right, here we are right here, the series of comments. Now, first thing, I do want to highlight that this is an inappropriate insult. I don't appreciate that, and I don't allow that. I've asked the poster to change it, but they have so far refused. Normally, I would delete it, but I want to maintain this thread at least until we get this video out so that we can cover this topic and also this wonderful link that Wolfie put on here to his video about gyroscopes. It's worth a watch. So let's get into this. Is the actual topic I want to look at. And the reason for it is because this is a really good point here. Biggest problem I can see is that you assume that a plane flies at its maximum altitude to automatically correct its pitch. If a low-flying plane flies at a mile from the ground, does your video still apply? No. A plane corrects for its altitude and pitch using the rudimentary apparatus on board, not the thinness of the air, LMAO. Okay, now this is a really good point that may have been unclear in my original video. Let's go back, look at the original video, and I'll clarify the point. Here we are. At this point, I was saying planes can't fly into space, and we all know that the reason planes can't fly into space is that you can't generate enough lift. Okay, I made that point in order to stress that we all know that that's a fact, and that even flat earthers are not going to argue that. That was my point with that. And I meant to be transitioning here into the lift equation from there. And in hindsight, looking back at it, after having looked at that comment, I was not entirely clear. You may have, as that commenter clearly did, you may have interpreted this to mean that the only place in the atmosphere that the plane follows the density is at the aircraft's ceiling, what we call the ceiling, which is when it can't go any higher. Because a few slides ago, that's what we were talking about. I talked about there's a point where the plane can't go any higher, and it's because of the density. And then I roll into this and I'm talking about the density. I never clarified that you don't have to be at the ceiling in order for that phenomenon to take place. Okay, so I'm clarifying that now. I want to make sure it's very clear. In the next upcoming video, we're going to look at this CL here, this lift coefficient. And I'm going to explain that that's not a constant no matter what, that you can vary it. You can pitch the nose up to get a higher CL. You can pitch the nose down to get a lower CL. So you can adjust the amount of lift that you're getting based on the pitch of the airplane. Of course, I also will be talking about that the velocity, the airspeed, goes in here into this equation as well. And you can adjust the height of the airplane. In fact, and hopefully in a future video we'll get to this, the real way you control the altitude of your aircraft is with this one here, is by throttling up or throttling down. If you throttle up, the aircraft will initially gain some speed, and now you'll have too much lift, right? You'll see that there's too much lift there. You don't change anything else, then you'll have too much lift. It'll climb. But as it climbs, the density will drop, right? And so you'll get to a new density where the plane is happy, right? And that is what I did not make clear in the previous video. And so I wanted to get this one out very short to clarify in case anyone else had that question or thought that that was a mistake, that I was implying that this equation says that there's only one density where the plane is at a cap. The plane, when trimmed, right? When trimmed out carefully by the pilot does this. You adjust your lift coefficient to be just right. You adjust your throttle to be just right. And as soon as it's just right, boom, that's where the plane's going to stay. And the plane will stay there at the current density. If the density changes, the plane will start moving around, and that won't be good. Let's just make sure in this video here, it's very, very clear that when trimmed for level flight, an aircraft will follow its current level of air density. This is not just for when you're at the so-called ceiling of the aircraft, which is when you've maxed the throttle to the firewall and it just cannot go any higher. That's the ceiling. We're not talking about just the ceiling. Anywhere from the ceiling down to the dirt, you can do this. Although if you're in the dirt, you better keep your eyes open for terrain, right? Okay. One final note, and that is this commenter was extremely rude and used offensive terminology, and I don't appreciate that. But that doesn't make him wrong, and I really want to emphasize that, especially for any skeptics or naysayers out there. Even if I don't like you personally, even if I don't agree with everything you have to say, if you make a correct point, I agree with that. And that is what we call intellectual honesty. And what he has pointed out here, I am explaining that I was not clear. He is correct that I was not clear. I would say that he's wrong that I have assumed this. I have not assumed this, but I could see how he thinks that I did. And that's on me. So this is a correction / clarification. I did not mean to imply that, but I see how that could have been implied. So no, the aircraft can do this altitude hold thing at any altitude that it can safely fly at. That's fine. And as far as rudimentary apparatus, yeah, we'll talk about control surfaces later on. At least I hope to. If this series remains popular, we'll get to the control surfaces. Maybe we'll talk about gyroscopes, altimeters, those kinds of things. You know, if there's something specific you guys want to talk about, something you want to hear, or if you have questions, hey, shoot them and we'll get you answers. Ideally, I'd love to see topics like this one brought in the form of a genuine question as opposed to a disingenuous attempt to dig. Like this comes in the form of an insult, which is really not necessary. You could just say, hey, did you assume? Right? As opposed to you assumed. It could have been, hey, did you assume that the plane is always flying at its maximum altitude? And then I could say, oh my gosh, no, I didn't mean to imply that. And thank you for pointing out that I was not clear about that. Okay? As opposed to, this approach. Okay. See you in the next video.